Hi guys, it is teacher Sally. Welcome to NFOs 103. And this is our third video about NFOs. And in this video, we're going to talk more about two or three special qualities of NFOs. And they are the augmented interval and the diminished interval. Before we move on to talk about the new qualities, let's revise the meaning of intervals. So the word intervals is a musical term that means the distance between two notes. And for the name of interval, they will include two parts. The first part is called a quality. The second part is the number of steps. Some example would be the minor third, major seventh, or the perfect fifth. So the first part here indicates the quality of the interval. And the second part here with the numbers tells how many steps there are between the two notes. And then for these steps, four of them are special because they are always associated with the quality perfect. And these steps are unison, the fourth, the fifth, and octave. So unless indicated, usually when you see that the note is a fourth or fifth apart, they are usually perfect fifth or perfect fourth. And for unison and octave, it's the same. However, when you write, when you have an interval that's a unison or an octave, you do not say it's a perfect unison or a perfect octave. You just say they are unison or they are an octave, because unison and octave is for the quality is a perfect by default. So we don't have to indicate that this is a perfect unison or a perfect octave. So let's move on. And if you watch the previous two videos about interval, which is interval 101 and interval 102, I'm assuming that you're probably very familiar with how to identify major and minor or perfect quality. However, we did not really talk about this too, which is the diminished and augmented interval. And in this video, we're going to talk more about that. So you may be wondering, what is the meaning of the diminished or an augmented intervals? So let's look at some definitions. So an augmented interval means an interval that is one semitone larger than a major or a perfect interval, while the diminished interval means an interval that is one semitone smaller than either a minor or a perfect intervals. So just by looking at the definition, you may still feel confused. So let's look at more examples now, and let's get the staff paper ready. Okay, now let's look at some augmented intervals first. So if you remember, the definition of augmented intervals is an interval that is one semitone larger than a major or a perfect intervals. So how exactly does that work? So let's look at how we do it. First, let's look at a major interval. So for example, if you are looking for the interval between G and E, first you count the number of steps between them. So about how to count the number of steps, please refer to the video interval 101. So now let's count together. From G to E, we have G, A, B, C, D, and E. And for counting number of steps, we always count from 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can say from G to E is a 6 apart. What about the quality? If we want to know the quality, we will have to count the number of semitones between G and E. So, and then we also have to write down all the half step between C to E, between G to E. So about how to count the number of semitones, you may refer to the video interval 102. Now let's do it together. Let's write down all the half steps. So G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. So we count, and for counting semitone, we always count from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. As you can see, there's 9 semitones between G and E. And if you look at your interval table that you get from interval 102, you can tell that the interval G and E would be a major 6. So that is how we look for major chord, isn't it? What about if now we're looking for G to E sharp? How do we find the interval? How do we identify the interval? So let's do it together following this step. First, we always count the number of steps between the notes. So from G to E sharp, let's mark down all the notes with a different note name at a different level. So we always count from 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is still a 6 apart. However, it's not an E anymore, it's an E sharp now. So now let's count the number of semitone between them. So by using this scale here, now we have an E sharp added. So instead of 9 semitone, we have 10 semitone now. And therefore, if you look at your interval table, you may say, okay, now we have 10 semitones, so that must be a minor 7th, right? And the answer is wrong, because if you count the number of steps, here, if you count the number of steps, it's very clear that from G to E sharp, we only have 6 steps. But it's not a major 6. It has 1 semitone more than what a major 6 would have. It's not 9 semitone between them, but there's 10. So according to the definition of an augmented intervals, instead of calling it a major 6, we will call this interval an augmented 6. So A6 would be a short form to write that. The full form to write augmented 6 would be augmented, N-E-D, and then 6. That would be the full form to write the name. So that's how we find augmented chord. Let's take another example using perfect interval. So what about, let's do A and E. So A and E is a perfect fifth, because if you count the number of steps, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 steps, so it's a fifth. And if you remember, a fifth is always associated with the interval perfect. And of course, if you want to, you can still count the number of semitone. So and therefore you can say 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 semitone between A and E. And therefore, with the help of the table, we can say it's a perfect fifth, right? However, if this happened, what should we do? Now we go from A to E sharp. And again, if you count the number of steps, it's still a fifth. Just like what we did earlier, it's still a fifth. But now we have 8 semitone, right? This is a perfect fourth if you look at the table. Not fourth, it's a perfect fifth if you look at the table, because there's 7 semitone. But now we have 1 more semitone for the perfect interval. And therefore, we do not call this a perfect fifth anymore. There is 1 interval more than a perfect interval, so we call this an augmented fifth. So that is how we identify augmented interval. Okay, let's move on to diminished interval now. So same wise, for diminished interval, the definition is an interval that is 1 semitone smaller than a minor or a perfect intervals. Very similar to augmented, and the way we do it would be very similar as well. So now let's look at some example. Let's look at a minor example. So for example, we have minor third here, F sharp and A. So if you count the number of steps, we have 1, 2, 3. So these two notes is a third apart. And then if you count the number of semitone, we have this. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Right. Yes, we have 3 semitone. And if you look at your table, 3 semitone means a minor third. Right? So that looks pretty okay, isn't it? Yeah. However, if you have an F sharp and A flat, oh my gosh, how do I identify the interval between these two notes? Okay, so let's go, let's do it with the same step. First, we count the number of steps. So from F sharp, and then we have G, and then we have A flat. So when you count the number of steps, always count the notes that is of a different level on the stuff paper. And then we count from 1. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's a third apart. So it's still a third. But if we count the number of semitone, let's see what happened. So we have F sharp, and then we have number of semitone. We have F sharp, and then we have G, and then we have A flat. So it's 0, 1, 2. Now we only have 2 semitone between them. And if you look at your table, when you have 2 semitone, you will say, oh, that is a whole step, or that is a major second, because we have 2 semitone. Well, for hearing, you are not wrong. However, for reading the music, we would not say that is a major second. Instead, we would say it's an augmented third, it's a diminished third. Okay, because the notes, for reading, the notes is actually is 3 steps apart from each other. So we cannot say it's a second. But it has 1 semitone, it is 1 semitone smaller than a usual minor third. So we are going to say it's a diminished third instead of a major second, even though they actually sound the same. So that's how we identify diminished interval for minor chords. Now let's move on to do another example for perfect intervals. So for perfect interval, let's say we can try A and D. So if you have A and D, and if you count number of steps with A, B, C, D. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is a fourth apart. And if you count the number of semitone, then we have this. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 semitone and 4 steps apart from each other. If you look at your table, you would say, okay, 5 semitone means a perfect fourth, which is right. So this is a perfect fourth. However, if we have something like this, what will happen? Let's say now we have A and D flat. So if you count the number of steps, it's still a fourth apart. It's still a fourth. 2, 3, 4. So it's a fourth. And then if you count the number of semitone, let's see. So we have A sharp, B, C sharp, which is actually a D flat. So a D flat, because it's also a C sharp, right? It's the same note. And then if we count the number of notes, it would be 0, like number of semitone, it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of 5, now we only have 4 semitone. And therefore, do not say it is a perfect fourth anymore. You may say, okay, now I have four semitones, so that should be a major third. Well, for listening, that is right. It sounds exactly like a major third. But for reading, because the note um, A to D flat has four step apart, because like if you count the number of steps, it's a fourth. It's not a third, so you cannot say it's a major third, and you have to say it is a diminished fourth. So that is how we identify augmented and diminished interval. We do it first by counting the number of steps, then we count the number of semitones. If you find that the number of semitones is one semitone smaller than a minor or a perfect interval, then you will say that is a diminished interval. And the full form to write a diminished fourth is this, and then a fourth. So that's how we write it in full form. And then alternatively, if it is a major interval or a perfect interval with one semitone more, then we would say that is an augmented interval. So that's how we identify the very special diminished and augmented intervals. Okay, so here come to our knowledge checkpoint. Here is a little quiz for yourself. Please try to identify the name of the intervals for the following notes. From here, this is one question, this is another question. You may pause the video and try to find out the intervals. And if you see a cross, it means a double sharp, while when you see two flat, it means a double flat. So for double sharp, it means the G has to go 2 half step upward, while a double flat means the note, the E has to go 2 half step downward. For more about double flat and double sharp, we will talk about it in another video about enharmonic notes. For now, let's try to do this knowledge checkpoint, and I will show you the answer. So this is the answers. Let's see how many questions you got it correctly. All right, this is the end of the video. So happy practicing, and practice make improvement. Thank you for watching. See ya.